Today, I am launching my candidacy for the United States Senate. I'm running because I believe it is necessary for a new generation of leaders to step up to the plate.
She said that if I ran, she wouldn't, and she announced 30 minutes after I more specifically stated my intention.
I think Senator Enzi may be confused.
Liz Cheney sparking a little family fight in Wyoming. Let's talk about that on our roundtable, joined again by Karl, along with Cokie Roberts, Matthew Dowd, Dana Perino from The Five on Fox News, Van Jones from CNN's Crossfire. And I do want to get to Liz Cheney, but let's begin, John, with Ted Cruz and the rush to Iowa this weekend. Rand Paul there as well. You know, we saw the interview, and listen, whether they say yes or no now, we know they're laying a groundwork.
Absolutely.
What kind of impression did they make?
Well, look, those two are going for basically the exact same constituency. And they're friends, they're allies. I mean, in many ways, Rand Paul made Ted Cruz the first
the non-squish.
The non-squish part. But, George, the last time around, you had a lot of Republican candidates, not many of them that were particularly electable. This time around, it's going to be a very crowded field, and you have a much less predictable situation. Let's face it, we knew basically that Mitt Romney was the front runner almost for the entire primary process this time. Now you're going to have, I think you're going to see Rubio on there. You could see Jeb Bush in there. You're going to see potentially Chris Christie. You could see governors like John Kasich. I think Paul Ryan's going to run. A much more crowded field,
Scott
a much
Walker
less predictable.
Yeah, and that's fun because the Republicans, we normally do have a front runner and know what's going to happen, and this is going to be an interesting race to watch.
In line.
No, that's right, and they usually do. You know, the line about falling, and Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. But I think it's interesting that Ted Cruz seems to have just written off the Hispanic vote. He's decided that he's going to oppose immigration, and there it goes. But he's clearly worried about the women's vote, and he's now he and Rand Paul have joined with Senator Gillibrand on the sexual assault in the military bill, and that is a funny place for him to be because it's basically saying take away the chain of command.
In opposition to most of the Republican leadership and most of the other conservatives.
And older Democrats as well. This is generational to some degree, but it's also a place where he's clearly going after the women's vote.
You're from Texas. You also worked with the senator on the Bush campaign.
Yeah, in the first campaign in '99 and 2000. Ted Cruz is a very smart guy, a very ambitious guy. I thought it was so telling, John, in your piece, one of the most telling things that I learned about Ted Cruz in that work and what came out across in your piece is when he's looking at a painting of himself before the Supreme Court, and he says, I look at this painting of myself before the Supreme Court and I'm humbled by it. It's a very telling sign. I think
maybe running for president.
Yeah. I think the thing Ted Cruz has to be careful of, as I listened to that interview, is two things. First, obviously, Barack Obama running for president, basically having not served in the U.S. Senate for 3 years or whatever that exo was. He set a standard that actually, ironically, Republicans totally criticized. How can he run? How can he run? He's not experienced enough and all that. He's got to be careful about being in too much of a hurry. Yeah. Sometimes being in a hurry gets you a place faster, but sometimes being in a hurry gets you in an accident. The other thing, George, I think, is he mentioned like Republicans win when they're run as conservatives. Actually, if you think about when people win for president, what they can be a certain ideology. They could be more liberal, like Barack Obama, or more conservative like George Bush or Ronald Reagan, but they always know how to speak to the middle. And I have not seen any evidence that Ted Cruz really knows how to speak to the middle of the country. You have to be able to speak to the middle of the country in order to get elected.
Dana, you're nodding your head.
I think that's probably, it's not probably. It is excellent advice. I think that Ted Cruz is an excellent national politician. He's also a very good retail politician, so that's good. Going to Iowa keeps his name in the paper and also keeps him with having a national profile for some big pieces of legislation that are coming down the pike. One of the questions I will be looking to see answered is on the fundraising piece. Can he turn that kind of national attention into something where you start to raise a lot of money? Because by next February, even though it feels very early to us to talk about 2016, if you have to raise about $1 billion to run for president in 2016, you're going to have to start pretty early and you have to start banking that money right away.
Well, Texas is good for that, though. I mean, being from Texas helps.
Yeah, that is. And I'll say that I think that what he was trying to say was the reason he has that painting up there is that he knows that you can give it your all, but you can still lose 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And that is on point.
I think he was trying to say something more.
You know, on the Republican side, wide open, so many people going in there. Do you think the prospect of Hillary Clinton with Joe Biden right behind her squashes all wannabes on the Democratic side?
It probably does, but I think it's much more interesting to watch the Republicans because I love it because partly, their congressional strategy, which is sort of gerrymander the country so they have all these quote-unquote safe seats, means in the House.
And so do the Democrats.
Yeah. But they have districts that really don't look like them. But the problem is they have districts that don't look like America at all, which means that for their congressional rhetoric and their congressional strategy being so hard on immigration, where it's not really where the middle of the country is anymore, I think their congressional strategy is making it hard for them to run for the president. And
for
Marco Rubio, as long as you keep showing Ted Cruz, every Democrat is happy. Because Marco Rubio is the one we're most afraid of, and he's just been given a sharp elbow by Ted Cruz and by his fellow Republicans.
Interesting, George, interesting. We have this conversation so many times in advance of these presidential campaigns.
For Democrats.
And we say Republicans are this and this. In the end, Republicans want to win. Republicans want to win the presidency back. And most of the time, they nominate a conservative, but a conservative who can speak broadly and deeply to the values of the country.
And Ted Cruz cannot do that. I'll tell you what, if you listen to Ted Cruz, you do not hear somebody. If you're a moderate, if you're a liberal, you hear a strident ideologue, and I don't think that's going to work.
Speaking of Democrats, though, Amy Klobuchar was also in Iowa, wasn't she?
Yeah, and I would look for her. And I think
Senator from Minnesota.
And I think you're going to see a lot of these Democrats start to build an organization, and then make that final decision on running, depending on who.
But meanwhile, back on the Republican side, you are seeing something interesting now happen in the Senate on a number of issues, even though you have this polarization that you talked about. Van, in the last week, we've seen bipartisan coalitions come together to figure out a way to get more of the president's appointments through. See this bipartisan coalition on immigration, on student loans.
Interesting, led by McCain and Schumer in most cases. I mean, Chuck Schumer has turned out to be the bipartisan guy.
On the Democratic side, but a lot of Republicans, Dana, now trying to say, wait, we do want to get something done.
Well, I think that's true. I don't think that people run for office to be obstructionists. I do think they want good policy. The interesting thing on the student loan piece that I think the media just blew right past was that the Republicans actually came to President Obama's side and said, okay, well, here's the compromise. It was more the left-wing Democrats in the Senate who were holding all of that up. Showed that President Obama still has some sway with them because he had a meeting with them on Tuesday night down at the White House and told the Senate Democrats, get this together and get this behind us. Guess what they did the next day? They got it done. But
I think that was
telling.
True.
It was more Democrats than Republicans.
They're in a position to retake the Senate. The Republicans are a very good position, but they can't run on nothing as incumbent Republicans. And the country is so mad at the Congress right now, and they're madder at Republicans than Democrats, according to the polls.
They
really do have to have something that they
which
can,
I disagree on part of it. I think both sides are complicit in drawing districts. Democrats want to draw districts that they're safe in. Republicans want to draw districts and they're safe in, whether it's in California or Texas. They're both complicit in this, and I don't think it's good for the democracy of the country. The Senate is still different. The Senate, you get elected statewide, you have to appeal to a broader constituency in most places. And I think Cokie's right. Republicans know that if they get so far out on this on the right and so obstructionist, they can't win the Senate.
Liz Cheney is actually not playing, but I just want to point out, Liz Cheney is not
get to that in a second.
I agree with that.
But this deal that they did on nominations, this was a complete cave-in by Republicans.
I disagree.
I mean, this was, look, the Republicans had spent 2 years blocking the nomination of Richard Cordray to run that Consumer Protection Bureau. They were adamant that this was not going to happen unless there were changes to the law, changes to how that bureau was put together. And Harry Reid promised to go nuclear. They really thought he was going to do it.
They wanted 2 of those nominees, the ones that were considered illegal appointees. They wanted them pulled. They got those 2 pulled.
Yeah,
and if for every compromise you define it as a loss for yourselves, then you're always going to be losing in America.
That's exactly right.
You can't always define a compromise as a loss.
You know, there are.
I'll tell you, the White House a month ago had no idea. If I had said, to senior White House officials, look, you're going to get Cordray, and you're not going to have to make a single change in the Consumer Protection Bureau.
But they had to pull the 2 nominees or the ones that they wanted.
That's a fig leaf. I do think it's sad, though, that we have this incredible backlog of judicial appointments. That is not moving at all. And you have
same was true during the Bush administration.
Well, but this is actually worse. Statistically, it's actually worse.
No,
well, we can argue about it, but I think it's bad for the country. I actually want to talk about Liz Cheney because this whole view that obstructionism is something that we're beginning to move past. She actually has said that she thinks it's the height of patriotism to actually obstruct.
But again, you see a similar dynamic here. You see a lot of the Republican establishment in Washington and in the state of Wyoming rising up against her.
Yes.
Well, some of that is to support Enzi, Senator Enzi. You know, they feel like it was an insult to him, and he's somebody they know and like, and so there's that. But
also the people in Wyoming apparently don't like it very much either if you look at the polling data. But here's what's interesting to me. I've watched Liz Cheney. I don't think that she's big on potholes in Wyoming. I don't think this is about the people of Wyoming. I don't think she's about the Republican Party that much because she's going to get a net zero increase in Republicans if she wins. I think she's running for president. I think that this is about the Cheney brand. I think she's running for president in 2020, and I hope the people in Wyoming have enough sense to know when they're being used.
well,
Karl, you know the Cheney family.
yeah.
Well, you were actually out there in Wyoming.
Yeah, I actually went to a rodeo with Liz Cheney when I was out there to interview her father. And look, I'd say don't underestimate this. This is a really tough race, George.
Yeah.
I mean, Enzi is not the kind of guy who she can run against and say, look, he's lost touch with Wyoming. I mean,
He's there every
Enzi
weekend.
never went to Washington. This is going to be a really tough race. And she made it very clear her father is not going to be out on the campaign trail with her. She wants to prove she can win this on her own, and that's going to be tough.
And
You know,
Senator Enzi is not Senator Lugar. Senator Enzi is the ninth most ideological conservative senator in the Senate. So it's like how she's going to run from the right on that. And she's making allusions to sort of he's too old or he's been there too long or he compromises too much. He doesn't compromise that much at all. I think the difference...
It's about the Cheney brand.
The difference in Wyoming is people in Wyoming, I've been there a lot. I know Liz. I think she's very talented, very smart,
I wouldn't
very bright.
I
wouldn't
like
put
her
it past her. But people in Wyoming, there is a sense of politeness and decorum and that in
She
states...
jumped the line.
And she jumped the
Can I
line.
give you an
that's
anecdote,
interesting.
having grown up there?
Yeah.
So I talked to my Aunt Patty Sue runs Memory Lanes Bowling Alley in Rollins, Wyoming. I have other family there that are building businesses and trying to make a living that way. And I assumed that she would say something along the lines of, well, we like Liz Cheney, but, you know, she should wait her turn. Let's just see how it goes. I was surprised. My aunt said, you know, the Senate doesn't come with a lifetime guarantee.
Wow.
And I would take a listen to Liz Cheney. So I think the Republicans might actually be more willing at least to hear her
this
out.
week, George,
Might not go for
another
her, but hear her out.
congressional or senatorial daughter is going to announce Michelle Nunn in Georgia, and she is a very different kind of a breed there because she's been in Atlanta for years and years and years, working with the people of Georgia
And Nunn
on
is
all
an
kinds of
amazing name in
issues.
Georgia.
You know, so it's a different approach to coming into public service.
We're just about out of time. We have less than a minute left, but didn't want to leave without remembering Helen Thomas. Dean of the White House Press Corps for so long. Started with President Kennedy, 10 presidents. She was in the first row asking very tough questions. Dana Perino, I know you were in the same position I was. I remember my first White House briefing. She would not let me go. She would not let me off the hook. I admired her tenacity and her passion, and she really did bring that commitment to work every day.
Yeah, when you would call on her in the front row, she's the only reporter that ever earned her own name on a seat in the briefing room, and you call her like, Helen, there was something was going to come up that you were either going to be angry about or frustrated with. I only lost my temper with her once. I liked her very much. My first day that I ever did a briefing, the TV briefing, she came up to me afterwards and could not have been more encouraging to me and said that she thought I was very trustworthy, and I worked really hard not to lose that.
Oh, that's...
I'll remember.
She was very encouraging to young women journalists, and they flocked around her as a hero because she really did try to smooth their
she
path.
really
She could
looked
be
out for
wickedly
them.
funny, too.
Yeah, she had a
absolutely.
great contagious laugh. She made a lot of she made people very frustrated.
An amazing career. We got to go. We'll be right back.